Hi, I'm Jonathan Restauric from Accenture, and today I'm going to be talking to you about a concept we call epic disruption. And what's the key message, what's the key thing we wanted to take away? And that is, if you're not disrupting yourself from within, you'll be disrupted from without. But what is epic disruption? Well, it's actually the same term others in the industry are talking about in terms of what they'd call the fourth industrial revolution. Why have we called it something different? We're nervous that a fourth of anything devalues and erodes the message. It says this is just the fourth iteration of something else. And there's been lots of technology revolutions and lots of technology change. So why is this one different? We think it's significantly different. Previous ones have had a core element of changing the productivity of specific processes within a business, either automating agricultural farming or automating specific clerical jobs within an industrial organisation or manufacturing, for instance. So what they've done is they've significantly changed the productivity and economics of a particular process within a business, but they haven't questioned and interrupted the underlying business model. And this set of changes impacts value chains, it impacts intermediaries, it upsets and changes industry barriers and business models. And once you're in that game, your change, your disruption, the threat and the opportunity are epic. And that's effectively our epic disruption. But of course, like anything, to help us remember and understand what those implications are, our epic disruption has an acronym, a wonderful four-letter acronym. And so we see this, and we'll talk this through in a little bit more detail, but the level of change is exponential, it's pervasive, it's intelligent, and it's continuous, and we'll see that. I'll talk through each of these different topics, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means for us as humans and workers, and what that might mean not just for organisations and business models and industry segments, but also what does it mean around the humans that work within organisations and how that affects the future of work. So let's start with the first piece, which is exponential. And as this loads, you've seen the S-curves before, the S-curves of new technology introduction. And it's been happening for years and quite significantly in a technology perspective or an IT perspective in the last 50 to 60 years. And in each of these curves, as you see, there's the initial excitement of something new. Then there's a little bit of a lull as we try to work out how to take advantage of the technology, how to scale it, how to commercialise it. Then there's the growth pattern, then there's the maturity, and then eventually, over a period of time, that technology becomes obsolete and is retired by the next wave. So this is a repeatable construct, a little bit like Moore's law, that sits there and says this is the nature of our industry, this is the nature of the technology change. But what's different here, if you look at it closely, is it's becoming an exponential wave of technology disruption. That the time frame and the cycles between the waves are getting shorter and shorter. The time and the duration between the technology being introduced and getting to maturity is getting thinner and thinner. And actually the amplitude of the change is getting higher and higher each time. And I talk to clients and say effectively, if this was the concept whereby you were using the surfing analogy, you know in the past you had the opportunity to choose which wave you wanted to surf. This one comes through, it's a good wave, I'm going to surf this one I'll wait it out. This next one I'm going to be a fast follower, for instance, as a particular choice. What we're seeing with this level of rapid cycles and continuous exponential change is if you decide not to get onto that wave, you've missed the opportunity and it'll be too late. It becomes a binary choice. I'm either on the leading edge or I'm left behind. Accenture surveyed a number of chief strategy officers and found out that this level of continuous and aggressive disruption and technology change is going to disrupt businesses in many respects. So that they came out with sort of something like 60% of businesses expected to have significant disruption at pace from this change, but only 20% were ready for it. So in the past, organisations have done SWOT analysis, they've done scenario planning, they've made deliberate decisions about how they actually did process and think about and react to the emerging technology changes. What we're saying is most of those techniques become less relevant in a world whereby this exponential impact and repetitive change comes in. You can do all the scenario planning you like, but that might be thrown out the door tomorrow when a new technology comes in, hits peak scale within the first 6 months, and your 3-year scenario planning is out the window. Our answer is don't not plan, but it's more important to plan to be agile and deal with the exponential change than to try to be precise about what the future will hold. So that's why it's exponential. Let's go to the next one. Let's talk about how it's pervasive. So exponential is really about how aggressive and how fast this change is becoming. The pervasive is really about the breadth of the change. As I spoke about before, in the past, you as an organisation or as people had a level of certainty around operating environment. An organisation knew what geography they were in, what the regulatory framework they were working to, who were the competitors, who is the target customers, what's the product, what industry are we actually working in. And then you're in a known scenario, quite often an oligopoly of competing to be slightly better than your competitors. And that works well, and we've had that happening and operating for a while. And lots of Harvard Business Review articles and activities and MBAs on how to succeed in that environment. But this level of technology disruption, the exponential and the level of breadth of it, is breaking down these assumptions. The technology changes coming in don't care about geographical barriers, because once I start to move from the physical to the virtual, from logical and digital means, I no longer have to worry about geographical boundaries. And so all of a sudden, global organisations and global business models are coming in and creating disruption. I no longer have certainty in my industry. Industry barriers are being blurred, industries are being combined. Competitors in different industries are coming and competing in the same ground that you're in. Let's look at Amazon and what they're doing to groceries. Let's look at the lift sharing organisations. I think Uber is the largest travel organisation in the world and doesn't actually own a car. So significantly changing the game. And let's keep on the Uber and talk about how this new technology is coming in and is ahead of the regulation. So you as a business have been working within a regulatory framework for a long period of time, and all of a sudden here's this left field technology change, organisation coming from beyond a geographical or an industry boundary and just well ahead of the regulatory framework and significantly interrupting your business. So who were your competitors in the past? You can't guarantee they'll be them in the future. And the protections you had, regulatory protections, geographical protections, industry protections, you can no longer rely on to stay static. And in that circumstance, there is a much more pervasive risk element on your business model. Let's also acknowledge at the same time, those same protections that are lost mean that it's a lot easier for you to, as a business, to go and take your business beyond geographical, regulatory, industry boundaries as well. So the same risk exists in an opportunity and a reward aspect as well. A critical aspect of the technology change that we're seeing is the significant impact on value chains. And the traditional value chain has a primary producer of something. On one end, it has the end consumer at the other end, and there's various intermediaries getting the goods from one end to the other. There's suppliers, there's logistics, there's the aggregators, there's the wholesalers, there's the customer service agents, there's retail organisations. There's all these intermediaries that are producing a service between many primary producers and many of the customers. A critical thing that we're starting to see in this technology disruption is the erosion of the value and the relevance of the intermediaries. We're seeing platforms that are connecting the original and core producer directly to the customer and taking 5 or 6 intermediaries out of the game here. And so in In the old world, I could be an intermediary doing a various activity, providing a particular service, and I might be aggregating or storing or moving goods. Unless I'm actually adding value, unless I'm actually improving the product or service, unless I'm doing something that's an incremental value that the customer will take some value and will pay some value for, I'm absolutely ripe to be intermediated by the technology giants, because these platforms that allow demand and supply to be directly connected are significantly impacting intermediaries. So if you're in the business of a middle section within the value chain, think very, very closely about what and how you're ensuring that you stay relevant, add value, and be ready to be disrupted yourselves, or disrupt others. And so that's why this is pervasive. It provides an absolute loss of the protections and the assumptions around which businesses were operating, and therefore significantly impacting business models, but it also removes the constraints. Let's move on to the next part of the epic disruption, which is intelligent. We've known for a long period of time that technology is a great help and support both for the concept of work and workers, and also for businesses. And we've gone all the way from automating agricultural and primary production, automating manufacturing and secondary production, and even clerical activities that work through into tertiary services. But the key construct of that automation, of what technology has been doing, is it's been automating effectively, I'll call it the low end of the pyramid of value. It's been automating either heavy-duty physical labour jobs, or it's been automating industrial, heavy, repeatable manufacturing activities, or it's been automating low-value transactional clerical activities in back office, accounting and bill presentment and those sorts of things. And during that period, there's been great opportunity for the humans to say, that's fantastic, we'll continue to use the technology to automate the low-value tasks, but there's still this fantastic role that the humans play, because we're up here making the great decisions. We've got the cognitive skills, we've got the IQ and EQ skills that are the difference, and we're the ones that will leverage and take advantage of this technology that automates the lower grade activities. The disruption that's happening in this situation and presently is that the technology automation is becoming more and more intelligent. And in fact, it's actually starting to move up and do a better job of the decision making and the cognitive things that humans have traditionally seen themselves as fantastic at. And we're seeing situations where AI-based models are doing better jobs of interpreting X-rays and early identification of cancers and leukemias than 30-year veterans in the medical field. And these people who are paid significant premiums to be the experts and have years and years of study and capability, and this is the real deep insights and IQ-based capabilities. We're actually now starting to see the technology catch up and beat the humans in that regard. And so what does it mean? What does it mean for businesses? What does it mean for us as humans when we thought we were the cognitive specialists, but actually the technology is becoming more and more intelligent and the automation is climbing higher and higher up that pyramid of value added? Well, what it means is we need to understand that, embrace that, and not fight it as every other technology revolution. Because the technology now allows us to do things like self-healing networks and activities and self-healing processes. So in the past, we've done things like, here's the process, the humans manage what the process is, but then we'll automate steps in the process. We're now seeing machine learning working through concepts like dynamic process control and allowing the processes to evolve over time based upon the data, the conditions, and the outcomes. So more and more of the cognitive and high-level activities are done by the intelligent automation. What this also does for businesses is the higher the automation works up the value chain, the intelligence up into the cognitive, is that it actually kills one of the core tenets that we've had in terms of business academia and assumptions, and that is the economies of scale. So as we get intelligent automation, we get into the situation where in the past, size and scale were a differential advantage for a business. We're now seeing that this intelligence means not only is size and scale no longer necessarily an advantage to an intelligent smaller business, if you're large and unintelligent, you're actually at a disadvantage than an intelligent and smaller and agile operator. So this intelligence is actually impacting core assumptions around the economies of scale. So let's talk a little bit about the final one, which is continuous. So we spoke a little bit about how the exponential is creating these waves and these rapid waves that are coming through. And the fact that we're in this time where the pace of change and the cycles of change are never going to be as slow as they are today, and they feel frenetic as they stand in today's environment. So as this change comes through, technology after technology after technology, we need to acknowledge that the technology change and disruption is continuous. It's not a start and a finish. It's not, well, this fourth industrial revolution or this epic disruption has started on date X and will finish on date Y. We need to acknowledge that we're actually into a new normal and that this is the future that we're going to deal with. This is the future we need to embrace. And in that situation, any organisation which has the disruptions, the threats, the opportunities, and understands the interest in taking advantage of these new technologies has a choice. How do I deal with this? How do I proactively deal with this? How do I reactively address the disruption and the threats that I have? And the traditional model that we've had is you kick off a transformation program. We need to move from where we are today to where we want to be in the future. Let's go and find some capital expenditure, put it together into a project, and run the transformation. We're going to take the business or a subset of the business from X to Y. Accenture's point of view is that doesn't work in this continually changing environment. And it's a little bit like the analogy of a government building a highway, and by the time they've built the highway is already redundant because the traffic volumes have increased at such a rate. And the concept that says this is such a continuous, endless wave of change, this is actually a tsunami rather than a set of individual waves, means that a transformation project, a start the project, finish the project approach is set for failure. Because by the time you're ready to finish the project, the technology's moved on, the opposition has moved on, there's new competitors, the customers have left, and the concept of a start and a finish of this doesn't fit the underlying business environment. If the business environment is continuous, disruptive technology change, then how do you set your business up to embrace and take advantage of this continuous change? And our answer is innovation, and the concept of an innovation culture and an innovation framework into that organisation. You can see in the slide behind, we've got that S-curve again. And so you set up a scenario here where rather than doing this on a start and a finish, you set this up so it's effectively a factory model. How do we set the organisation up to review and research, to trial and ideate, to have a go at, to scale and validate the new technologies and take advantage of those technologies that serve the business, or trial and defer the technologies that don't necessarily serve. And so the concept here of treating this like a continuous factory model rather than a once-off project is a critical decision point. And then the next decision point is, how do I make an innovation culture and an innovation factory work? Because actually, there are so many organisations that are setting up innovation labs, that are setting up innovation teams, that are spending a lot of money, a lot of investment in innovation, but not getting the return on that investment. Most organisations are getting about 20 to 25% efficiency or return on the level of investment they're making in innovation. And what's the problem? What's the constraint? Why don't organisations get that return? Our hypothesis is that there's a lot of focus on the creative art of innovation. There's lots of money and ideas and talent spent on the ideation, but not necessarily on the industrial engineering associated with turning it into a factory model. And so lots of innovation is kicked off, lots of great ideas are created, lots of MVPs are created. But the vast majority of those MVPs fail and fall over when the great idea that worked off to the side tries to fuse back into the larger organisation. Lots of ideation comes through really positively, but then can't be scaled into commercial practicalities. And so for innovation to occur, you need the culture, you need an organisational construct and prioritisation of your innovation factory, but you also critically need to run it with the combination of it not just being an art, but a science. And when you think about innovation as a continuous engineering principle with the artistic creativity into it, that's when you get the success. And so our concept here is embrace the continuous change, set your organisation up to dynamically be an agile, continually changing organisation that is taking advantage of the new technologies, inhaling them, testing them, validating them, embedding them and scaling them to take advantage of the opportunities. And as I said before, if you don't do this, you'll be disrupted. If you take advantage of this, you'll be ahead of the game. This is in many respects a binary environment we're about to move into. And so we talked a little bit about epic disruption, the exponential, the pervasive. So the exponential is the size and the height and the speed of the cycles. The pervasive is about the breadth of that impact on business models. The intelligent is about how the automation is moving further and further up the cognitive scale. And the continuous is what and how does an organisation accept that this isn't finite and discrete activities. This is now a continuous wave of technology. That creates, as you can see, this huge epic disruption, this huge epic risk to organisational business models, but at the same time an even bigger opportunity for success. What it also does is creates this question which says, what's the role of the human in these organisations? Because companies are merely a connection of assets, and most of which are the humans. And so what does this mean for the humans in a business? And what does this mean actually about the future of work? And how does that fit? What happens with this level of disruption and how this is going to change careers? How is this going to change the concept of education? Will we retire into the future? How does that occur? There's a lot of research that says our current model of 20 to 30 years worth of study, 25 to 30 years of work and between 5 to 15 years of retirement is not the future. That we'll actually start working earlier, we'll take sabbaticals throughout our career, we'll do continuous learning and accreditation throughout, we'll probably change careers, we'll change roles, we'll change skills, and we'll probably move into a continuous environment where we're working well into our aged period, but at different hours in a more flexible environment. And that's the future of careers, but what about the future of the actual work that we do? Importantly, to take advantage and to succeed in this environment of epic disruption, what's critical is that the organisation embraces and moves forward. And to be successful, they need to take the workforce forward. And so what and how do you reimagine the concept of work in this new environment? Now that change is coming through, now that the concept of projects is less important than continuous innovation, now that automation is moving up and changing the nature of what can be done by technology versus humans. So part of this is to actually reimagine what work is, what and how are we producing goods and services, and how might we reimagine the concept of how we create and do that work. And once you've reimagined what work should be, you then need to pivot your workforce from what they do today to what they'll do into the future. And unsurprisingly, a critical element of that is the need to re-skill those individuals as you pivot the workforce. But what are those skills? What is it that those humans need to do, and how does that work change, and how do we embrace this change associated with epic disruption? Importantly, there's a lot of narrative about technology killing and removing jobs, and Accenture's view is absolutely the opposite to that. We see that the technology is going to make some skills and activities within jobs redundant. In many respects, specific job titles and organisational constructs will become redundant. But jobs and skills and activities will still be required. We as an organisation have automated about 30% of our work in the last 5 years. But during that time frame, we've actually grown the size of our business from about 400,000 to 500,000 people. So this is really about changing the nature of work, changing the skills, and increasing the total value add and the total potential outcome and productivity of the business. The automation technologies, our view, is work in concert with the humans. And what you can see from the graph here is that there's some roles and some jobs that will have a greater level of automation and redundancy of specific skills, but there is still a necessity for the role. There's still a necessity for the human in the non-purple side. And importantly, irrespective of how much of the actual skills are being automated, there is still the necessity for the humans. And we can see even that the automation is even taking some of the science and engineering roles and taking some of those critical skills out of the equation. But this isn't binary. This isn't my role is what I do, and I'm either going to be automated and redundant, or I'm going to be safe and this automation's not going to affect me. That's not nuanced enough. There will be some machine-only activities. There will still be some human-only activities. Humans have the capability to dream, have the capability to aspire, have the capability to think through futures and implications that the computers can't. But what's the critical value? What's the critical thing that keeps humans employed, keeps creating economic value and intellectual value for us? It's this middle. It's what we call the human and machine relationships, or human-machine scenarios. And this is where, at the moment, you either have something automated or the humans do stuff. We're going to see a significantly greater proportion of our roles and our jobs being a mixture of the human and the machine elements. And you can see here some of the adjectives that help us understand what are the types of jobs, or what are the types of skills that work perfectly in this symbiotic relationship between both humans and machines. And this is where we turn the technology value and the disruption into the positive language rather than the negative language. Because it's this middle ground where we actually create value and create purpose for people in their jobs and careers. And to work closely with the machines, acknowledging that the automation is moving up the cognitive scale. What are the sorts of skills and characteristics that humans need to continue to be successful into the future in this environment of epic disruption? We've done some research and analysis, and on this slide here you can see there's 3 different categories of skills. The dark blue or black is the technical skills. The purple are the functional skills required to actually take the technology and apply them against functional context and circumstance. And the light blue on this screen are the social and the emotional skills required. And it's this social and emotional skills where humans working closely with the functional and technical capabilities of the intelligent automation add the most value. And therefore we get into a scenario where actually what becomes more important and what my role is, what my title might happen to be, what department I live in, what level in an organisation I am, because that will become less important, because all of that will become dynamic as the business has to react to constantly and exponentially dynamic business environments and technology changes, is that the skills become the new professional currency. And the ability for humans to retrain, the ability for humans to do the micro accreditation, the ability for humans to try new skills and develop capabilities and competencies with new skills, especially those with the emotional and the social elements to them. We're going to see emotional equivalent, the EQ, becoming more important than IQ into the future. This is where the humans add value. And as you can see, once the social and functional skills are matched and augmented in their symbiotic nature with the technology resources, this is where value gets created. And so hopefully I've been able to discuss today and give you a sense of just how epic this change is, how exponentially aggressive and at the speed of the change, how broad and pervasive that change is, how the technology is moving up into the intelligent decision-making elements of work and production, and how this is a continuous and endless cycle of change. And in that environment, this is significantly more than just a fourth version of something. This is a new era. This is a new normal. And this is a critical environment where, with so many of the previous economic and business assumptions being challenged, we are in an environment where, as I said at the start, as a business, as a worker, as a human, as a customer, we're in a binary environment. You're either embracing and progressing and dynamically adjusting to this technology change and embracing it, or you're going to be left behind. There's no middle ground in this scenario. The people who can't adjust to the new skills, the people who say, I've got fantastic IQ, I'm going to take on the computer, I'm not going to work in concert with it, will lose. The organisations that don't acknowledge that their industry demarcation is no longer a ticket to success will become redundant. The organisations that have for 50 years played a critical role moving goods and services between supplier and consumer and don't acknowledge that there's a huge opportunity for the intermediary disintermediation have a huge disruptive risk to their business. And that same binary risk that exists provides the same or greater opportunities for future success. Thank you for your time.